Could one innocent family question expose a much deeper emotional divide inside the royal family? A dramatic account circulating about a private Windsor gathering claims Princess Charlotte faced an uncomfortable conversation involving family titles, memories, and the grandmother she never had the chance to meet, Princess Diana. The story suggests what followed eventually placed Prince William in the difficult position of balancing royal harmony with his daughter's personal feelings. But because these supposed private conversations have not been publicly verified, the real story is less about scandal and more about an intriguing question. Can royal protocol ever determine whom a child considers family? According to the account, the tension supposedly surfaced during a private family lunch at Windsor Castle, attended by Charles, Camilla, William, Catherine, and their children. The gathering was described as relaxed, with conversation deliberately kept away from institutional disagreements. At some point, however, Camilla allegedly made a casual reference, placing herself within the children's grandparent generation. Charlotte reportedly responded that she already knew who her grandmothers were and did not want to use that particular family title for Camilla. There is no public evidence confirming that exchange occurred, but within the narrative, it becomes the moment that exposes a much older emotional issue. The story portrays Charles as initially surprised by Charlotte's response and eager to understand why she felt so strongly. Rather than describing Charlotte as deliberately disrespectful, the account presents her supposed reaction as a distinction between formal titles and personal relationships. A child raised within the monarchy would naturally understand words such as king, queen, prince, and princess as official titles. But words such as grandmother belong to an entirely different category. They describe emotional relationships rather than constitutional positions. That distinction becomes the heart of the narrative. Royal protocol can determine how someone is addressed publicly. But private affection cannot simply be assigned by rank. According to the story, Catherine later spoke privately with Charlotte rather than immediately treating the situation as a disciplinary problem. Their alleged conversation focused on what the word grandmother actually meant to Charlotte. The narrative suggests she associated it with safety, trust, family stories, and genuine emotional closeness. Catherine supposedly concluded that forcing a particular family label would achieve little if the feeling behind that label wasn't naturally present. Again, no verified account of this conversation is available. Still, as a storytelling theme, it raises a relatable parenting dilemma. Should children be required to use affectionate family titles simply because adults believe doing so would maintain harmony? The narrative then shifts toward Princess Diana. William has publicly spoken over the years about keeping his mother's memory alive for his children. But the supplied story goes significantly further by describing private conversations that cannot be independently confirmed. According to its version of events, Charlotte had become increasingly curious about the grandmother she never met through family photographs and stories. Diana, therefore, represented more than a historical royal figure in the child's imagination. She represented part of her father's family history. The story suggests this emotional connection became especially important when Charlotte supposedly began wondering whether accepting another grandmother figure somehow diminished Diana's place within her family. A key alleged incident supposedly occurred weeks before the Windsor lunch during a private family gathering involving photographs and historical objects. The account claims Charlotte referred affectionately to Diana while looking at an old photograph, after which Camilla allegedly made a comment suggesting children should focus on family members physically present in their lives. Because there is no reliable public confirmation of that private exchange, it would be inappropriate to attribute those exact words to Camilla as fact. Within the narrative, however, Charlotte reportedly interpreted the conversation differently from how an adult might have intended it. She feared remembering Diana was somehow creating a problem. The story claims Charlotte subsequently overheard another discussion concerning repeated references to Diana and how they might affect the children. Again, this alleged private conversation is unsupported by independently verifiable evidence. Nevertheless, the narrative uses it to explain Charlotte's supposed emotional reasoning. Rather than confronting anyone immediately, she allegedly kept her feelings private and eventually concluded that she did not want to use grandmother for Camilla. Importantly, that conclusion would not necessarily mean hostility toward Camilla. Children can respect an adult without defining that relationship using a specific affectionate title. The account, therefore, frames Charlotte's decision as a personal boundary rather than an institutional rebellion. When William supposedly learned what had been troubling Charlotte, the narrative portrays him primarily as a father rather than the Prince of Wales. Instead of demanding an apology from his daughter, he allegedly wanted to understand why she had reached such a firm conclusion. The emotional conflict becomes particularly complicated because Diana was William's mother. Any suggestion that his children should minimize her memory would therefore carry deeply personal implications. However, the supplied account provides no documentation establishing that William confronted Camilla over such comment. A responsible reading should therefore treat this section as an unverified royal narrative, while recognizing the broader theme it explores, protecting children's emotional autonomy. According to the story, William eventually requested a private conversation with Camilla. Rather than focusing on whether Charlotte had embarrassed anyone, he supposedly emphasized that no child should feel pressured to choose between remembering one family member and caring about another. The narrative portrays Camilla as explaining that she never intended to make Charlotte uncomfortable and had herself struggled for years with comparisons to Diana. That emotional tension is plausible as a storytelling theme, but the specific conversation remains unverified. The important distinction is that affection does not have to operate as a competition. Remembering Diana would not automatically prevent Charlotte from developing her own relationship with Camilla. The account says William then established a clear parental boundary. Catherine and he would decide how sensitive emotional matters involving their children were handled. Publicly, Charlotte could still observe whatever formal etiquette was appropriate for members of the royal family. Privately, however, she would not supposedly be forced to use an affectionate title she did not genuinely feel comfortable using. This is where the narrative separates protocol from emotion most clearly. Calling someone queen in an official setting relates to position and etiquette. Calling someone grandmother carries personal meaning. One can be governed by established convention, the other depends upon the relationship between two people. The supplied story then claims Charles became involved because the disagreement risked creating tension between William and Camilla. According to this unverified version, Charles initially worried about family unity, but eventually accepted that William and Catherine should determine how their daughter handled private family relationships. There is no official palace statement confirming such a discussion took place. Still, the scenario presents an interesting generational question for the monarchy. Future kings and queens live inside an institution built around hierarchy, but they are also parents raising children. When those two responsibilities collide, maintaining appearances may not always be the healthiest or most sustainable solution. The narrative further claims Camilla temporarily withdrew from some private family gatherings following the disagreement. That detail should also be treated cautiously because the source provides no verifiable scheduling records or official confirmation establishing that any absence resulted from Charlotte. More importantly, assigning responsibility for an adult's decisions to a child would create an unfair emotional burden. The story therefore portrays Catherine as reassuring Charlotte that adults remain responsible for managing their own reactions. Whether or not this particular Windsor incident occurred, that message stands independently. Children should be taught respectful communication. but they should not automatically become responsible for resolving complicated emotional histories between adults. Ultimately, the strongest part of this story isn't an alleged palace confrontation. It's the complicated legacy surrounding Diana and the generations born after her death. William's children never met their paternal grandmother, yet photographs, family stories, public history, and their father's memories inevitably connect them to her. At the same time, Camilla occupies an entirely different place within their present-day family structure. Those two realities do not necessarily have to compete. A child can understand Camilla's official position, develop whatever relationship naturally grows over time, and still preserve Diana's unique place in family history without being forced to choose one woman over another. So the real question isn't whether Princess Charlotte defeated anyone or whether Camilla lost some imagined royal battle. The supplied account doesn't provide enough reliable evidence to support that kind of conclusion. The more meaningful question is whether affectionate family titles should ever be demanded, rather than allowed to develop naturally. What do you think? Should children be free to decide which personal family titles feel genuine to them, even inside a royal household? Share your opinion respectfully in the comments. And if you enjoy carefully framed royal family stories without presenting unverified palace claims as confirmed facts, subscribe and turn on notifications for the next video.